early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, now let's get into some technology matters that has to do with finance too. And that is the use of blockchain technology for fiscal functions or fiscal purposes. Now, I mentioned before we went in that break that some countries are beginning to use blockchain technology for fiscal transparency due to the nature of the technology itself. One country in Africa that has adopted that is Guinea-Bissau. Looking at blockchain technology, what it entails and what it can do in terms of financial management. We'll be having a blockchain expert speak to the issue this morning, and is joining us virtually. Andrew Ogbe is a blockchain expert. Andrew, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. It's good to be here this morning. How are you doing?
Well, I hope you are too.
Yes, I'm doing awesome. I'm doing great.
All right, in here because we also have Sam Orovwuje, who is a public and international affairs analyst. He'll be speaking to that aspect, which is the use of blockchain technology for fiscal transparency. And also, there's a second issue that we'll be looking at the second half of the show, which is what the IMF chief has said regarding the growth of the GCC, which is expected to rebound as the IMF chief says risk remains. So if you're wondering what is GCC, it's just Gulf Cooperation countries, about 6 of them, but the IMF has made some projections regarding their growth. We'll look at that after we talk about fiscal transparency. Good morning, Sam Orovwuje. It's good to see you this Monday morning.
Thank you very much indeed. Good to be here.
Oh, we're happy that you're here. All right, let's get to Andrew first. Blockchain technology. You know, when we hear that, sometimes it seems like something very complex. I believe it's complex, but I know you can just decipher the whole thing and make it as simple as possible. Exactly what is blockchain technology and what are the uses of blockchain?
Okay, in layman terms, first of all, thank you also for having me here. Now, in layman terms, blockchain is simply a decentralized ledger, a decentralized way of storing data. You know, the traditional means of storing data is having the records of your data stored in a central server and probably backed up somewhere. Now, but blockchain decentralizes this record such that records can be stored across thousands and even millions of computers that are connected over a network. So blockchain is simply a record system that is decentralized. So I believe, for example, you guys have a database and probably centralized. Now, but with blockchain, you can decentralize such records. So any place where records are being stored, any form of record can be stored on the blockchain, records of supply chain, financial records, medical records, what have you. Any form of record can be stored on the blockchain. So the blockchain is simply a record system that is fully decentralized. And by being decentralized, it makes it transparent and immutable.
All right, Andrew, glad to have you join us once again for this conversation. You are the tech expert here, so it's good you've provided that introduction and background to the conversation. But Guinea-Bissau is making history as one of the first West African countries to introduce these tailored towards maintaining fiscal transparency. I'd like you to shed light on why do you think this is not likely embraced the way it ought to if we're recording a few African countries embracing this technology? And how can these be tailored towards achieving transparency in civil service, in issues related to wages, which is what this country has done in recent times? How can that be something that can be largely embraced as far as African nations are concerned?
Okay, thank you for that question. First of all, we need to understand that this is an emerging technology, so adoption will grow over time. So it's not going to be rocket science because it's an emerging technology. But it's actually a commendable thing that Guinea-Bissau have done, right? Setting the pace for other African countries to follow. Now, blockchain, because of its unique way of storing data, guarantees transparency and immutability, such that data that are stored on the blockchain cannot be tampered with. Now, we are going to see, because of the demand on governance for transparency and a more transparent government that people demand, we're going to see governments of several other nations begin to look in this direction. And that is what we have consistently encouraged. But, you know, because blockchain takes away some level of central power, it's not going to come very easy. It's not going to come very cheap. It's going to come as a result of a lot of public education on what this technology, the potential of this technology, because some people still associate blockchain with scam and blockchain with only cryptocurrencies. But blockchain is beyond that. Blockchain has application in various industries. Blockchain can be applied in supply chain. In fact, one of the very important areas that blockchain can be applied is in election records, right? If we have blockchain being applied in our elections, we will have greater transparency and efficiency of data, and we won't have issues of electoral malpractices and the rest, because that data on the blockchain cannot be tampered with. Data on the blockchain are public, and everybody can view the data that are being recorded on the blockchain. Other areas that this, like Guinea-Bissau has shown, is in the area of their wage bill management, which is one of the areas many countries struggle with because of corruption. And we saw that in the report that their wage bill, which used to take over about 84% of their tax revenue, was drastically reduced to about 50% right now. Now that shows you how important blockchain can be. And blockchain can also enhance and simplify auditing process. Auditing process can be simplified as a result of blockchain. And that is what Guinea-Bissau is going to be experiencing right now. A lot of money is being spent to audit reports in the traditional way. But with blockchain, all these costs can be cut down. And imagine the over 34% that have been saved as a result of this application in Guinea-Bissau can now be plunged into other areas of their economy, in developing their education, their healthcare, and all other sectors that need fund. And I think this is a commendable step that the Guinea-Bissau government, in conjunction with IMF, has taken. And we hope to see it more in other countries. Thank you very much.
All right, Sam Orovwuje, let's look at Guinea-Bissau's move to ensure fiscal transparency. So before the adoption of blockchain technology in Guinea-Bissau, now it was revealed that as of 2020, when the project was first designed, 84% of the state's tax revenue went toward paying public employees in Guinea-Bissau. Now that has dropped to 50% because Guinea-Bissau aims to use blockchain to actually do a lot of things, not just for tracing what is being spent, even for ghost workers and so many other aspects of governance. What do you think about what Guinea-Bissau is doing vis-a-vis the complaint of African countries in terms of prudent financial management?
I think with the introduction of blockchain technology in terms of public administration in Guinea-Bissau, which began 2020, and if you look at the benchmark results that were just released from the IMF, who is an enabler of that project, it shows that there's a high level of transparency in the deployment of that technology, particularly in terms of the payroll, which has been able to save about 34% of what was used in terms of managing payrolls and wages within the system. Therefore, if you look at the concept of open governance, open democracy, I think this is the right way to go, using data as a means of projecting transparency in government. And I'm sure this hasn't taken firm root in West Africa. IMF, as the enabler, I'm sure they're going to sell this package to some other African country that can use that initiative in terms of open governance, open democracy, in enhancing transparency in terms of wage administration and how monies are spent in the public sector. And I think it's welcoming, and I think it's a good initiative by the government of Guinea-Bissau in terms of fiscal responsibility, fiscal transparency, fiscal accountability, which on the long run will benefit the citizens, where money is saved from some other department where blockchain technology is used to see how you can control the management of wages, administration, and some order within the ecosystem of providing fiscal responsibility.
All right, let me bring in Andrew here now. I'd like you to give us a proper understanding of what it involves when you need to put in place a system driven by blockchain technology, perhaps towards wages or whatever might be the motive, but give us a picture of how it works. And then, do you foresee any level of resistance if this is going to be adopted in other nations? In terms of infrastructure, what are some of the things that need to be put in place? How expensive or affordable it is when it comes to the adoption of a system driven by blockchain technology?
Okay. One of the major resistance that nations will face, and I think even Guinea-Bissau has faced, is in the area of technical expertise, having people who can develop this technology, trustworthy people can develop this technology. Because if even though blockchain is secured, it's a secured way of storing data, if not done properly, right, we have seen that corruptions can also be done using blockchain technology. So, but one of the areas governments need to focus on is in the area of what? Technical expertise, getting the right people to get these things done. And I think the private sector is doing a whole lot. There are a lot of, speaking for example, like in Nigeria, now there are a whole lot of experts in Nigeria who understand this game and are able to use it to deploy it into several sectors of our economy. So one of the key areas is in the area of technical expertise. Another area would be in government acceptance. You know, there's always a resistance to change anytime something new is coming. And we're going to see a lot of government government officials resist these things. And that's because the older generation do not understand fully this technology. So because the older generation that are in government may not fully understand this technology, they may not accept or adopt it at first. Right, I was part of a team who wrote to the National Assembly, for example, in Nigeria, as to the application of blockchain in our election. But because of we don't have, we are not properly educated on what blockchain is, you see, there will be this resistance upon the first approach. So, but I believe that this is going to improve over time as blockchain education improves. Another thing would be in the education, blockchain education in mainstream. So we need to see blockchain education and blockchain awareness being carried out more so that people will be more aware of the importance and the value of blockchain technology. So I think these are just the key areas where we see some resistance right now.
While you were speaking earlier, you mentioned that blockchain can be used negatively. What are the areas that blockchain can be used negatively? And do we need a sort of regulatory framework for blockchain to work in Nigeria? In Guinea-Bissau, we've seen the progress they've made with blockchain. In Nigeria, there's still a struggle transiting to e-governance. So what should be in place first before adopting blockchain for governance?
Okay, you see, when it comes to, because blockchain records are immutable. So any record that you store on blockchain cannot be changed. So it means if from the foundation we don't get it right, it means records are already wrong. And if you don't get the right people in place for this technology to be adopted, for this technology to be implemented, things are already going to go wrong. So even
blockchain on records being correctly wrong, what would that mean, and what would be the implications?
Okay, if data integrity is already tampered with, then there is no transparency. If data integrity is already tampered with from the beginning, then there's no transparency.
I just wanted you to clear that. You could continue on the things that should be on ground first before the adoption of blockchain technology for fiscal transparency and other aspects that blockchain could be used for development. Regulatory framework.
Okay. One of the regulatory, I think governments, even though blockchain is decentralized, then there needs to be regulatory framework that protects citizens as against the harmful use of blockchain technology, so that blockchain technology actually reaches its full potential and its full capacity. So they need to, government needs to put a regulatory framework so that individuals do not manipulate the system. So there still needs to be regulatory framework. Even in Guinea-Bissau, I know that they have regulatory framework to protect the adoption of blockchain technology in the nation, so that individuals don't hijack this process, because we've seen, for example, in Nigeria, blockchain technology being associated with terrorism financing and several other corrupt practices, money laundering and the rest. These things can be associated with blockchain technology if we don't have proper regulatory framework. And one of such regulatory framework could be KYC being done by participants on any blockchain network. So if KYC is being done, we know who is transferring what and who is receiving what. So proper KYC also needs to be done. This kind of regulatory framework would ensure that blockchain is not being used for other corrupt practices.
Andrew, what a way to just wrap up that conversation, because time will not permit us to go further. We must thank you for sharing your thoughts and your ideas regards this development. Let's hope that the issue of transparency can actually be achieved and other nations will adopt this technology. Thank you so much for taking time to have this conversation with us.
Thank you for having me here.
Let's get back to Sam now, who is right here with us in the studio. You heard Andrew talked about the need for transparency and to ensure that you have a form of regulation. What are some of other issues related to the adoption of technology and the issue of regulation in Africa? Does it not bother you if you're talking about a kind of technology that is in the vogue in the West, and here in Africa, you're just having one or two nations just adopting it? How do you feel?
I think he spoke about corruption as a major impediment to adoption of technology, and Africa, more often than not, when you talk about technology penetration and corruption, has become a major issue. Therefore, most African countries are finding it difficult to provide a regulatory framework, like Blessing mentioned earlier, so that we can adopt new technologies which will enhance accountability, transparency in government. So that's one of the major impediments. But the case of Guinea-Bissau, a small country on the west coast of Africa, taking that initiative, I'm sure within the ECOWAS sub-region, government and the IMF, they begin to encourage the adoption of this technology to enhance transparency, particularly in terms of wage-based payment. If you look at this from the perspective of Nigeria, with a large wage bill, particularly at the federal government level, if blockchain technology is deployed, the issues of illegal payouts to people due to corruption might be reduced drastically. So therefore, it's not about the issue of technology itself, it's the environment, the ecosystem that supports the adoption of those technology to enhance transparency in governance. That will be the key challenge for most African leaders.
All right, let's get to the second leg of the conversation, which is the last part today. It's about the GCC region. You have the IMF scoring, the Gulf region, scoring them high when it comes to unemployment rate, inflation rate. Does that not sound remarkable? What do you think is playing out in that region?
It is remarkable. About 3 days ago, when the IMF chief, Georgieva, on the sideline event of the Gulf Cooperation Council ministerial meeting, his opening remark encouraged that the GCC country, that's the Gulf states, or you might call them Arab states, are doing remarkably well in terms of the level of employment, the low rate of inflation. These are driven essentially by tourism, trade and finance, where in the last 1 year, there's an encouragement from a 4.2% growth to an estimated 4.4 growth, economic growth in that area. So therefore, the IMF was saying that if the Gulf Cooperation Council ministers are able to fine-tune their policy framework in a sustainable manner, then that region will continually be at the pace of economic growth and development. Beyond the energy sector, which is a major driver, tourism, trade, and finance has become a major ecosystem that is driving economic growth in that region. So that's underscore some of the fiscal and monetary policy that the Arab states have been able to put together in the last 2-3 years that has sustained this growth.
Now, if you look at the 6 countries that are part of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, you find Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. And like you rightly said, it could be referred to as the Arab states. They have one thing in common. They have oil, and they are very key when we talk about energy for the world. In spite of the progress that they have made, which the IMF has also talked about, saying that there's economic rebound in that region, but there are risks. One of them is geopolitical tensions, which seem to be emerging around that region, particularly the Middle East area, which some of these countries are very close to. What are your thoughts on this risk that the GCC countries seem to?
Actually, the IMF mentioned the political tension, particularly within that region. In spite of those tensions, the figures or the numbers are looking very good. That tension will continue to exist within that region, but that is not to say it will impact negatively on the 6 Arab states. That projection will go into 2025 in spite of the tension being witnessed in the Middle East. Therefore, that tension will not remarkably affect those growth potential that will lead to a rebound in the economic growth of that region.
One thing that the GCC countries have been able to achieve is economic cooperation, the existence of a free trade zone in that area and a common market. Does this political tension have the capability of interfering with the economic cooperation that exists in that region?
I don't think so personally, because if you look at the outlook that was projected by the IMF in that ministerial conference that just took place about 3 days ago, why the tension exists, it doesn't have a significant implication for the growth that has been foreseen in that region. But then, beyond the energy sector, there's a growing improvement in tourism, in trade and financial instruments that region has continued to leverage on in terms of the economic development. So, by and large, the tension in the Middle East is not likely to affect what goes on in the Gulf state. And those projections were actually done even in this ministerial conference that just ended about 3 to 4 days ago.
Now, still talking about the potential risk, one of the risks identified by IMF has to do with the fluctuation in oil prices. In fact, I would love to quote IMF here. Fluctuations in oil prices and production could reduce financial buffers and have negative spillovers to the non-oil economy. So she talked about or make reference to the issue of the political tension and the potential risks to the economy of that region. Let's look at the fluctuations in oil prices, which may erode what you call the financial buffer some of these nations should have. That region is also known for oil production. Now, with this advisory from IMF, how do you think this region can manage this looming danger, the fluctuations in oil prices and the impact on their economy?
I think essentially that has to do with the diplomacy and see how they can play in their broader nation states that are engulfed in political tension. But mind you, what IMF is saying here is essentially beyond the energy sector, which is the mainstay of those economies. But you're saying that with improvement in tourism, trade, and financial services, in spite of the shocks that are likely to come from the energy, in line with the political tension in that environment. Once tourism, trade, and financial service is sustained, then the economy will grow by 4.4% in 2025. The growth rate from last year to 2024 has been sustained at 4.2. Therefore, in spite of these challenges, the outlook does not foresee any danger that these figures are likely to drop, while taking cognizance of those tensions. And I think the Gulf states we act as a buffer nation in terms of providing diplomatic imperative for some of the other Arab nations, particularly the Middle East, that is engulfed in a political tension. So they will have what you call the balancing act to be able to sustain their economy. So they won't want that tension to escalate to a point that will jeopardize its economic growth in that region.
Now, another challenge is the diversification, economic diversification in that region, which the IMF actually also advocates. There seems to be a challenge with diversifying away from oil dependency in that region. Apart from countries like the Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates that have been able to do that in recent time and still on that track, trying to diversify away from oil dependence. What are the fundamental issues with diversifying the economy of the GCC?
I think the GCC is already in that threshold in terms of diversification beyond non-energy sector, which is the mainstay of those economies. So they have had a very robust development strategy in place for tourism, for trade. You have the trade zones in those regions. You're talking about new financial sector where a lot of bond stocks and financial services are going into that environment to see how they can leverage on the financial buoyancy of those Gulf states, particularly UAE and Saudi Arabia, who has continued to provide the leadership in terms of the diversification, which I am underscore in that ministerial conference, which ended about 3 or 4 days ago.
All right. As we wrap up, just like you said, the GCC regions, they've been able to make some remarkable diversification by taking advantage of what we call the non-oil sector, the non-hydrocarbon economy. Talks about tourism, hospitality. What are the takeaways here for African nations? Most African nations, they are all dependent. The economy is driven by oil and gas sector. And here you have a region who has taken advantage of diversifying with non-hydrocarbon sector. What are the takeaways for African nations here?
The takeaways simply means, one, beyond your mainstay, which is the primary product that will take outside for exploitation, it's good that we must look inward into some other sector, a non-oil sector, particularly tourism, which has enhanced the growth in the Gulf region. On the other hand, too, we need a responsible and visionary leadership to move away from this traditional means of earning to new other sector that can grow the economy, taking advantage of tourism, trade, and financial services. Then Africa as a continent must look inward to support themselves in this other sector so that we can grow the economy and enhance economic prosperity for citizens.
Despite being in a zone or in an area that is volatile, so to speak, and prone to geopolitical tensions, these 6 states have been able to manage themselves out of it. What do you think has been part of the reason why they've been able to manage out of it? Is there any lesson for other countries or other regions to learn?
I think essentially it's about visionary leadership a committed leadership that take cognizance of the welfare of their citizens. I think that's essentially the major driver. So you look at some of the literature, particularly in UAE, visionary leadership has led to those groups. So if we take it home here, we need visionary leaders who can take the initiative. Then if you look at the 3C of leadership, we talk about competence, capacity, and perhaps compassion or courage to grow those economies. We help our systems to move in the same direction like the Gulf states.
All right, well said there. It's often said that everything rises and falls on leadership, which is what you've done to summarize what can be done in the African continent to replicate the kind of success that the GCC have recorded in terms of tourism and hospitality. Sam Orovwuje, I must have to thank you for sharing your thoughts on this story and for being here as always.
Thank you.
All right, that's the show today. We thank you so much for making our time to watch. You can do more by just sharing today's content and also leaving a message. What's your contribution? What's your take on the GCC? What's your take on even the adoption of blockchain for governance, for fiscal transparency, and what can be done to improve the welfare of teachers? These are the issues that have been discussed here today. We'll take it over now to you so that you can let us know what you think on them. I'm Blessing Eichie. The show returns tomorrow, 8 a.m. West African time, and Market Insight is built for 11 a.m. here on Souq News TV. There are so many more that will come after Market Insight. All we ask is that you stay, and please, if you have a radio, I'm very sure if you do not, then of course you can maybe download an app through which you can listen to radio, or maybe get one. You know, there's this transistor radio that some people carry along. And the reason you need this is so you can listen to the I 104.9, a place where business makes bits. See you tomorrow.
And it's still a special day and a special month to celebrate teachers. So one way or the other, I want you to do a recap of teachers who have helped in shaping your lives. This would be a good time to remember them. Perhaps you place a call to them, send them messages, for you're a product of the teachers who you've encountered in your life. So let's set this opportunity to celebrate them. Don't forget our previous conversation and the one we just had. You can do a catch up on all our social media platforms, on our YouTube page. Just search for Souq News TV. There you find all the conversations we've had today. Don't forget, LXTing will always return bigger and better tomorrow. I remain Femi Ayodele. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.